Today's episode, personal, special, someone I really look up to and someone I'm connected to for a long time. It's my sister, Folami Jones. Shaylin Folami Jones has done so much work in so many different ways, but everything's centered around community. And as I've seen this strong, intelligent, determined woman grow up, I've seen her take on more and more and more. That includes working with immigrant women, that includes running her own cafe, that includes having a midwifery degree and delivering over 100 babies. And then now she just graduated with her law degree. Super talented, super special, Folami Jones. So welcome everyone to another episode of Empathize Others, the podcast. And today I've got someone real special to me, someone that I'm connected to, but yet, this is a community person. Forget the suspense, it's my sister, my younger sister, Folami, and so happy to have her here. And rightly so, when I thought about this podcast and I think about people that are passionate about community, listen, that's my sister. And we're going to go through her connections to community, why it's so important to her. But there's so many levels as I saw my sister grow up, as her being passionate and connected and actually needing community. Community was so important to her. So what a perfect guest for us to have today in order to give her a chance to reflect and celebrate that kind of lifeblood that she has. And we have the same, dad, and we've got the same kind of upbringing. But I mean, she comes at it from a strong woman point of view. She comes at it from a global, international point of view, which I always appreciated. So we want to welcome to the podcast today my younger sister, Folami Jones.
Hello, and thank you. And if the apple don't fall far from the tree, you are my husband. So what can we say?
Yeah, so Folami, I'm so happy to have you here, because when I think about, especially when I think about the sisterhood community, I really learned a lot from you around what that support looks like, and from almost like a matriarchal point of view versus a patriarchal point of view. And I would say right from the beginning that our father is Rocky Jones, and he was a civil rights lawyer and did a lot of things, but he did them, and not to take away from it, but from a very patriarchal kind of point of view. It was an Augy. He was a guy. There were things that he did that came out of him being a privileged male, but yet he still did the work. Don't get me wrong. Then I see that you have a lot of his similarities, but yet you bring an angle that I find is unique. So let's go back to your first memories. Let's go back first. Speaking of community, what do you identify as your community that you grew up in, you learned from? And that can be, I know that's multifaceted, so feel free to talk about what do you think is community? What community brought you up?
That is a really good question. Well, automatically what resonates with me, and I think that's because of our father, is, the African Nova Scotian community. That's the Indigenous historic community. And so that has definitely shaped a lot of who I am. And if we think about the name Folami, it's actually my middle name, as you know. My first name is Shaylin. And as a child, that name wasn't one that I wanted to carry because it sounded different. People used to make fun of it. And so it actually means respect and honor me. So there's that part of me that's really connected to community that way. But then there's also my mother, who is from Tantallon, St. Margaret's Bay, who's very rich in their history in terms of the Acadian history. And so there was a part of my life and upbringing that was in Tantallon and in Bedford
Yeah.
that definitely shaped who I am too. And summers were spent in East Preston, and we can't forget our, the community that we hail from, the Marsh and Truro. So I would say it's like
Yes.
pockets. Yeah.
No, that I like that though, because there's a real realistic viewpoint that you're bringing, is that it's many communities make up who we are. Because when we talk about it takes a village, for many people, that village is various spots, right? And so, as you're transitioning from Tantallon to Bedford, I know we spoke a little bit earlier about what were your senses of community then, from a positive and maybe a negative point of view. Not negative, but things that were working for you community wise, things that weren't working for you community wise, early on in your, say, preteen, teen years.
Yeah. Well, Bedford was actually the younger part. And so I would say, as I was thinking, as we were talking earlier, I remembered the block parent signs in the windows. And that was a sign that used to be put up to say, this is a safe space where you can go if you ever feel threatened, or if you fall down and hurt your knee. There
Yeah.
was no worry. You taught your children, go, you can knock on these doors. And now when I think about my own children, that never even existed. So in Bedford, there was block parents, and there were places that I felt, this is okay. The flip side to that is, I lived on a small street on Birch Street in Bedford, and I was the only Black student in the school until Yolande came, who's a family friend and a sister to me, and she was the other. We were the only two. And so there were many times that sense of community meant who was going to protect you, who was going to laugh with you, who was going to let you skip with you. And there was clear definitions of what driveways you could play on and what ones you couldn't. And so I'd say for me, when I was younger, community really was shaped by the welcomeness of me as a young Black child. I would say that in Bedford. And then you fast forward to kind of Tantallon, which mapped on and had a lot of similar experiences. But now I'm a teenager, right? And I'm a rebel in my own way. And Hammonds Plains and Park Walks there. And so now I'm spending my summers in East Preston. And so this identity of what our father was bringing into me in terms of being proud to be a young Black girl, I could now flourish a bit more. But still wasn't too safe, because again, there was very few Black students at that school, but in where I lived, there was none. I mean, we lived in the middle of the country. We had a marina and a bunch of fields. So, I would say, as we came to town, and now there's more diversity, as much as we have in Nova Scotia, and of course our extended families and our aunts and uncles. So my community, definitely, I was thinking about it, was whoever was the extension of who my family was. That's how it happened. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I like it. You're bringing something here too around comfort zone, right? Like, community is not a linear thing, and it's not like you can define it. It's who you're comfortable with. And like you said, like you knew which driveways you could be in and which driveways you couldn't be in. As you start to, I know that you went to Halifax West High School, and so as that started to as you blossom, you started to be in the city. What were some of the things that were new kind of experiences for you community wise? Like, because I know some of your history, but there were things that you were attracted to that you didn't have in Bedford, you didn't have in Tantallon. And these things I thought started to shape who you are now. Can you speak to, let's say you're a young adult, and so obviously the African Nova Scotian community was a big piece of it. What would be some of the other things that you thought were starting to I guess broaden your community, your sense of community?
Well, if you remember, Augie, and that, I think my year or the year after was one of the last few, CAYG, the Cultural Awareness
Yeah,
Youth Group was huge.
yeah,
And, David Woods would have been your time, Anne Marie, his sister was mine, but I became the president of CAYG. So I was really involved in that. I had an opportunity through that organization to travel, to go to Philadelphia. We went to Temple University, which was the first Black university. I mean, I've never been again since.
Yeah.
So being involved in school curriculum activities, the debate team. But I also would say my spirituality shifted. I started to connect because Halifax West is, well, actually, Clayton Park and Fairview area is the most diverse community or, hub, if you would, east of Montreal. So
Yes.
I was able to experience, other people from all over, and I started to study Islam and definitely dabbled in thought and took some time in that space, which was really influential, and I'm thankful for those moments. So that that was a big shift for me, and then connecting with other young girls who were interested in being a little bit more politicized, thinking maybe a bit more around what does it mean to be a woman, what does it mean to be a young woman, and I had a child when I was young. I started my family young. So, lots of different shaping in that way. And so my community grew from this small little Bedford of protective, boundaries to this broadened idea of, oh, you're from a whole different country. You're on the other side of the world. You speak different languages. You pray differently, to other mothers who, now there's this culture of women who are breastfeeding and birthing, and that started early before I even went to Toronto. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's and I taught at Halifax West, and I really remember that that was a school, and this was on Dutch Village Road for those people that know Halifax, and now it's been rebuilt, the school. But that school had prayer rooms, and it's interesting because your global perspective and mine as well started to grow at Halifax West in this diversity because you had Fairview, you had Clayton Park, you had the pubs, all of these areas were feeding into this school that had this real diversity. But then you hit on something too around, um, womanhood, right? And this is what I wanted to get into because as you transition from, graduating and finishing up high school, you're starting to be drawn towards Toronto, and
Yeah.
so speak about, what was it like before we even get into what you started to study, like moving from the Halifax community into this metropolis, like what was
I
that like?
remember, I literally, to this day, I think I struggle with subways. I remember I got to Toronto. Number one, it smelled to me. It still
Oh,
smells to me.
geez.
It's got a strong smell of garbage and things like that. But anyway, yeah, the subway. I mean, this train that traveled under the ground, and people would just stand so close to it. I remember literally standing against the wall thinking, this is the most scariest, horrifying thing in the world. Can you imagine? Yeah. I mean, and then, but there was that, the fast paced part of it. But then there was this richness of just everywhere you turned, there was a different nationality, there was different foods. There were people that were, in their 60s that had been there for 30, 40 years and didn't speak English proudly.
Yeah,
It swallowed me.
yeah.
Toronto swallowed me. Yeah. In a good way. Yeah.
And so then you start to think about a career, a profession, and midwifery, which I thought was so kind of cool. I didn't know a whole lot about that. Can you talk about how you got interested in that, the school you went to, your experiences? Yeah, talk about, because there's a community in that, right? In supporting women through childbirth, after, pre, during, and post. And so talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's funny when you say, how did you get into that? Because I asked myself that question about the next career later. But I actually attended a birth of a friend here in Nova Scotia when I was 15, who she was older, but I was there as a support person. So ever since I saw that birth, I was hungry for it. I knew that I wanted to support women. I was intrigued by the birth process. So in moving to Toronto, I went to do nursing first. So I did nursing first. And the hopes was so that I could get into the midwifery program. So the midwifery
Mhm.
program is very competitive. They take 40 applicants a year. There's thousands of people that apply. I didn't even think I was going to get in. And it is also, again, yet another profession where we don't see racialized people as often, at least in the institution itself here. But as we know, midwifery is one of the oldest practicing professions. Women have been birthing from the time we came here to this space. So
Yeah.
I mean, it is right. So it was interesting to see how I hate to call it industrialized, but it feels much like that, how birth became that. So midwifery,
Yes.
tries to safeguard that, but if you put it in an academic setting, it changes, right? And so I ended up
Mhm.
at Ryerson University, and yeah, I met a whole new group of women. And midwifery isn't just about birthing; it's also about like this feminist thought, this reshaping the way that we think, the way that we think about our bodies, the way that we
Yes.
understand women's bodies, how we connect with the childbirth experience or the lack of, right? So yeah, that was another sense of community, and I still stay very close to my colleagues there. Yeah.
Yeah, and you bring out something that there's I wouldn't say there's a viewpoint in the politicizing of owning the body and women being, there's so many ways that women are fractured and fragmented around their body in the birth process. And so I never thought about it being not just about the birthing of children, but of empowering women, to be themselves and to appreciate. I often think like there's a godlike quality to anyone that can bring life onto the planet, and so when you think about women, the power that they have, and let's be honest, it's been through patriarchy that we've made women feel like their job is to just work for men and have babies for men, but yet that goes
Mhm.
against the godlike divinity of having the power to make life, right? And so was there a
Yeah.
connection, even a spiritual connection too?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking as you're saying that. I mean, if you, there was many times when I would birth a baby, or I was birthing a baby, I was catching a baby, and thinking about my hands are the first to touch this life, and how
Wow.
important it is that that me myself am in a good state of mind, because you're ushering, a baby into this world, and yeah, it's a very I believe it's a very spiritual opportunity. It's a gift to be able to do something like that, to share in that process. It's not for everyone, for sure, but yeah, and I think there's something that you're also giving to this woman and her family, if she has family or however she sees herself in that circle, is the autonomy. You're giving women the right to
Yeah.
make choice and where and how
Yes.
she births. And it's a political statement too. So yeah, I mean, we could talk there forever. You should do a whole podcast on that.
But we'll circle back. We'll circle
Yeah.
back on that. I want to link another community, because when I was teaching in St. Lucia, and Rocky and Sharon and you came to visit, and I was living in heavy woods, like deep in St. Lucia, and there was a kind of an introduction for you to Rastafarianism, and so when you went to Toronto, and I know you had long, we will put a picture up of how long your
Mhm,
dreadlocks were.
mhm,
Can you talk a little bit about what Rastafarianism meant to you and that community? So we talk about Nyabingi, which is Rastafarian church. I know that you were
mhm,
involved in Nyabingi too. So
mhm,
what was that community like?
mm. Yeah, so it's like this mapping of experiences all at the same time. You're right. You actually, and I always applaud you in terms of that seed that you gave me, because so coming into Rastafari through your connection and through traveling also really shaped who I am. And so I think the faith itself, but the community in particularly,
Mhm.
allowed myself and my partner at the time, firm, to raise our children. Again, this autonomy. It's very interesting that that seems to be a common thing that comes up. To express and to live a life that reflected our religious, political, spiritual beliefs. And we identified with that. So it wasn't, I started a homeschooling co-op. So times
Community.
right? So not only do we homeschool, then we started a co-op because we're like, what other community members are like us, and who else wants to raise your children with a certain type of curriculum? Well, I do. I said, okay, well, how about this? Because I can't do it every day, but let's do a co-op. And in that way, you do Monday, I do Tuesday, and as long as we have some agreement on the types of things that we believe in and teach, then we can teach our children. And so we did that. We ran a collective co-op of a homeschooling of a few families together, and we did that for a year and change, and that was also really amazing. So the community gave me strength. I mean, what's so beautiful about Rastafari is that even if we think about reggae, we think about that political voice, even just to resist the system, to have a counter story to what is the normative. Yeah.
Yeah, and you again. I love these podcast discussions because there's growth in it, right? And there's even like a reasoning. That's a word from Rastafarianism. We're reasoning, and the reasoning there seems to bubble up autonomy, and we're going to come back to that, right? Like, do you feel accepted and valued and autonomous, powerful in your space? And that's a big part of the way we grew up, and wanting to feel comfortable wherever we went. And that's one of the things that our dad really talked to us about is that. So as you talk about you're in Toronto, you're in the big city, there's a calling for you to return to Nova Scotia. You do come back. So from the subway story, which is one end of you going to Toronto, what was it like returning back to Nova Scotia? Yeah, and then did you rethink the community here?
Yeah, I mean, it was over a decade and some later, and so for sure, I had grown. My thoughts had grown, my family had grown. And I was excited because I was here, as you said, I was here for family and my family's health. And so it was really nice to be home and to support. I didn't have the homeschooling community that I had in Toronto. And things changed, but that's okay. So the children went to public school here. And it's interesting because it was the first time, and again, I'm just coming back to in terms of the idea of community, but where some of those struggles are. And so it was the first time the children were ever called. And I remember them coming home and, a parent had yelling at them or whatever, and they came home and were in tears, and things that they didn't see before because they didn't have the same contrast in terms of community. And so that was a big kind of shift. And so and then even I think some of our community members too are a little bit, can be at times small-minded. And so this broader sense of who we are and expanding the way that we think and how we socialize, Nova Scotians sometimes, and even specifically in our community, too, can be, they're funnel visioned. And so that took a bit. And anyway, I went on to do my master's, which I didn't get to finish the thesis, but I did get to study in a cohort at the Mount. And then ended up.
And that was Afrocentricity, an Afrocentric master's.
A master's in education. Yeah, rightly. That's just. I sometimes like, how many things have I done? And then worked at ISANS, as you said, the Immigration Settlement Resettlement Agency at the time, and ADAM, which was the African Diaspora Association of the Maritimes, and anyway, all over. And then Kwacha House. I decided.
So that's what I wanted to get to. Yes, Kwacha House.
Yeah, Kwacha House. So I was working at ISANS, happy. I mean, I loved my job. And I was working in community, working with, my particular role was working with refugees, government-assisted refugees. But somehow, because I just happen to be one of those people that move where the wind takes her. And so I'm on my way to Fairview to visit somebody, and there was this little green house at the bottom of Central and Dutch Village. It had a for rent sign in it. So I just parked in front of that little house, and I looked and I said, I'm going to start a cafe. And I came home and told Mom, was like, you're crazy. There's no way. I said, oh, yeah, I'm going to. And so I left my job, put all my buttons, which was not very many, and this is where it's beautiful in terms of community, and decided I'm opening up the restaurant, this cafe that's going to be, a space where, people from all over can come and talk, and you can have these political discussions, and it's going to be a safe space, and we're going to really broaden the general conversation of how we engage with the ideas of race and how we talk about gender. And so here births Kwacha House. And let me tell you, Augy, there were days that I sat in that cafe, I tell you no word of a lie, and random people would come through with gifts for the cafe, not for me, for the cafe. And things like statues and mirrors. And I mean, I was starting to lose space of where I was going to put all these things because they felt the sense of community. They owned the cafe.
Yes.
But it was to the point where, and this is interesting, but people felt so connected to it that it became more like a community center, but it was for profit. And so that's where we struggled. We struggled deeply. I mean, we had repasses of people's funerals there. I remember we had anniversaries of weddings there, birthday parties, dominoes tournaments. I mean, you name it, drumming sessions. Oh, goodness. We've had so many things there. But it didn't make any money because it was all birthed out of love. So it lasted.
And obviously, as your brother during that time, I was supportive. I was working in Antigonish at the time, and I would love to drive in and come to the cafe. And I'd always go, listen, Folami, you got some eclectic people here. Like it was a space, but it was a beautiful space, but it really represented diversity. Like the people in there were diverse as far as their abilities, as far as race and gender and all of that, sexuality, everything was there. And the interesting part that I do want to let the audience know is that Kwacha House was the name of a organization and space that our dad had created. And if you Google Kwacha House, there's a National Film Board clip of my dad, and it was an organizational political space for people to talk. So even though you wanted to sell coffee and food, and you had good food, like they were nice, it was like mango cheesecake, and it had a Caribbean African feel, but people were so community oriented at the cafe that they wouldn't spend their money. Like it was, so one part of it was super beautiful, and then when you had to pay your bills, you're just like, it's interesting that it didn't. There was this thing. Well, no, because it still became Kwacha House. And so you couldn't make it Starbucks. There had to be this Starbucks piece to it that didn't flip, but it definitely was Kwacha House. It was definitely a space where people who wouldn't feel comfortable in certain coffee shops felt comfortable in your coffee shop.
And, like the NDP had their AGM there. There were times where it's funny, even there were some white folks that came in and sat in spaces and said, what is so beautiful, Folami, about this is we wouldn't normally have engaged perhaps with the community on this level. But because of the way that the tables were set up and the types of people that would come, ideas, conversations were within earshot. So there was almost like this language, this conversation that was happening across tables, but not necessarily directly. And
it was collective. There was this collective conversation. It was group conversation, wasn't it? If you're at a table, you couldn't, which happens at some of the coffee shops. It's two people in their own thing. It was this waves of conversation and even if you turned from your table and went, hey, that's interesting, no one told you or gave you that look like mind your business. You were able to join the conversation. So now, and we keep circling back, and our dad is really important to us on a lot of levels. But then I remember you gave me this idea, and you go, I think I'm going to apply for law school. So to give a little context to that, Rocky Jones was a big part of creating an Indigenous and Black space at the law school. And he actually was the first valedictorian at 50 years old. He was valedictorian of the law class and went on to do Supreme Court stuff and things like that. So his picture's up at the Dow Law Library. And after the cafe is kind of, disintegrating a bit, you say to me, yeah, I think I'm going to go to law school. So midwifery, eye sands, coffee shop, and then now you're in law. And congratulations to you, because you recently, I watched, it's COVID, I watched your graduation online, but I can proudly say that you've now graduated from law school. So let's talk about the beginning and the middle and end of that from a community perspective. So going into law school in the IB&M program, talk about that, going through it, and then how you feel at this point, having achieved a law degree.
I think I'd love to start with the IB&M, because one of the things that I left with is what I started with, which is the sense of family and community. The Indigenous Black and Mi'kmaq initiative is of its own type of initiative. There is nothing else like it in the world. It is intentional about trying to diversify, specifically historic African Nova Scotians and First Nations people from the Maritimes into DAL. So that's how the program started, because there wasn't enough of us in the program and in the justice system. And so as of just a few years ago, we had our 200th graduate student from the IB&M initiative. And it's changed the face of justice. And for that, I am so proud to be a part of the initiative. And so from that, there's your sense of community, there's your sense of family. But I would say that, going to law school, I mean, definitely Dad was a huge influence. Of course, you see, I seen Dad sit there and burn midnight oil over a case. I've seen him burn midnight oil getting ready for a protest. I see him burn midnight oil playing poker. So
I was going to say.
Burning midnight oil many a night, as you have, many things. But justice was always, as we started the conversation, and as you said, it was a part of who we were in any form or fashion. I mean, I did toy drives with Dad. I mean, we had to give up all my toys to give to the community. I mean, sitting at the employment center and maid office. And anyway, I mean, many of our experiences with MAPON, and there are others too who've had those things. I just had the privilege to be able to get into the IB&M program, and for that has changed my life. But the justice system has failed our communities deeply, and it's not unknown. And if I think about that, for example, even if I thought recently I was working at a community clinic and was doing, a case in the child welfare area, and it was a young Black mom. And then I looked over to the other students, and the rest of my particular class and clinic was all white except for one other student. But anyhow, as I started to survey the students to say, well, how many other Black clients are there in this particular area, which is in child welfare area? And the student next to me, she goes, Folami, now that you think about it, all my 4 cases are Black moms. And so as the conversation went on, you start to see the intersections of race and gender and how that plays out in the justice system. It's not just by chance. And so
socioeconomics too, socioeconomics.
Right. Yes, class, yes, yeah. And so this is 2021. We're still looking at these. Are there any stats on these things? No. So my hope is, now graduating, I'm with the amazing firm McGinnis Cooper, and still got lots of work to do. McGinnis Cooper got lots of work to do, and they name that and they own that, which is great. And so they're trying to increase their own equity and diversity. But the justice system needs us, but they need us in the corporate world too. This is not just to say for representation in terms of the over criminalization of Black and brown bodies, but also because we make business, we have businesses, we bring money to the economy. And so all around, things I think are going to change, and slowly but surely, but we just have to keep agitating, as Daddy was saying. Keep agitating. Yeah.
Yeah, and this brings me to, because what a great, reflection on. I'm really proud of you, as your brother, and the things that you've taken risk. I think it's high risk, high reward. Like, you've done things that are just, people at first go, "Are you crazy?" But then you make it work. So I really applaud you for that. So now let's talk about future. I know I was listening to your graduation, when they did a profile on you, and you said that there's a community piece to what you ultimately want to do. When you think about that utopian kind of best case scenario law firm, talk a little about that, and that also speaks to, again, being there for community. What is that vision that you have of your law firm?
Oh, of my law firm. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I hate to say like a running joke, but it is true, and it should be actualized, and I should actualize it at some point, and I hope to. I mean, look at me, I'm at a firm, and many other people are at the. If you're in a larger firm in Nova Scotia, there are very few racialized people and very few Black lawyers. Wouldn't it be great to have a firm that had a stronger sense of human rights and equity and diversity? And we're seeing niche firms pop up. I don't want to necessarily be pigeonholed, but I do want to shift policy. And so I think there's many ways of how we can understand the way that the law works and how it can influence good things to come about. And that is through corporate, that's through business, that's through policy, that's through human rights, that's through all kinds of areas. But a firm that had a commitment and accountability, and that's seen in their membership of just not just the lawyers themselves, but also the community that they serve, and
Mhm.
the things that they do. But when you say what next, I actually say me. I am excited to hit pause for just a moment. I People don't realize law school is, I mean, when you go back older and in the context of today, for me, and I'm a mom and I'm a mom of three, taking a moment to pause and gather parts of me back and
Yeah.
get ready to enter back into a workforce that doesn't look like me. So I need a minute, and I think that's where the allyship comes into place. I think that's where empathizing others. I'm very thankful that my firm has and allowed me to have a little bit of space to put myself back together with all this work to do, and that has been done. And just breathe and take it in for a minute. So that's what I'm up to next is the me time. Yeah.
Well, I love that you brought it up as a concluding thought, because as we do this podcast and we speak to people who are giving energy to community, right? Not everybody
Mhm.
does that. Then you
Yeah.
can get on one bar, you can get on half a bar, right? And so if you don't have
Yeah.
that self care piece, then you don't get to
Yeah.
4 bars, and there's no way you can serve other people if you're down and out. And oftentimes when we're on one bar, there's also this thing around being really irritable, like you don't have the capacity to deal with some of the microaggressions or roadblocks
Yeah.
or things that come up in your way when you're agitating for change. And so I love that you bring that up as a closing thought around, you know what, Augie, yeah, my thing is I'm not jumping into this vision of a law school or a law firm, etc. I need to recharge my batteries so that in this
Yeah.
next phase I'm energized enough to do the work that I want to do. And I think that's a really beautiful thought, Falami, when we think about the concept of empathize others. You can't empathize others if you don't take care of yourself. So I
No.
really appreciate that piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wanna thank you. What a great conversation, and I my idea for having this podcast was to celebrate and promote and highlight people like yourself, and get to the the other side of why do you do it? What do you get out of it? And hopefully to motivate our listeners, the audience, to think about giving, right? Because you give a lot. You give. I'm amazed at the amount of people that come in and out of your like. I'll tell you, I'm more introverted than that. As my sister, like you have, there's so many people. Hey, just going in and out because you have that real sense of community, and I do applaud you for that because yes, it's part of your DNA, but it's also a real giving of yourself, and I love you for that, and I'm really looking forward to see what you do once you get on your 4 bars. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Augusto Jones. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for watching this episode of Empathize Others, the podcast. We hope that you really enjoyed the show. If you're enjoying the podcast series overall, as much as we enjoy making it, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow, and when you subscribe, you'll know right away when our new episodes are released.